Hello everyone. In this project we're going to build a learning management system with Django. So it contains features like having login and registration page for existing or new users. And there are two types of users, staffs and students. We're going to have a profile for each one of those students as well. The staff account and student account varies quite a bit. Staff, for example, staff can create assignments for students that have enrolled to a particular section. And students, on the other hand, can respond to those questions, and staff can then view their responses in a good way. And staffs also have the power to give them unit test marks, and the student account contains, when you open the result tab in the student account, the marks will be displayed in a graphical way with the help of plots and so on. Let me just show you a quick example of how it works. So here I have two types of window of the same browser. Okay, so this is the page that this is the web page, and these three buttons don't do much because it's going to be some information, and we're not going to focus much on the front end, so we'll be just focusing much on the functionalities. So let me create a new user and call it test user. Okay, and I'm going to give it a fake email ID, and I'm going to give it password, some testing 123. Okay, so now my account is created. I can log in, but before that let me just open the admin account. So I have a staff account already built, and I'm just going to log in with the staff account, whereas the test user I created is a student account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the student, so this is the student, right? I have many students here, and I'm going to make the student to be a family of and CSE department. So right now we don't have a CSE department, so I'm just going to make a new section, right? So I'm going to call this CSE. Okay, so now we have a CSE section, and that student I'm going to put in the CSE section. Okay, so we have the profiles. So the student already have a profile, and I'm just making it as CS. So staff has access to these. Okay, and we can restrict the account, like the students portal as well, but I'm just going to leave it as is. So since I made this new student a CSE department, so I'm going to give a few questions to those department. So here I'm just going to add a question. So this is the first question for CSE department. Okay, and I'm going to select that this question is going to be visible for all the CSE students. Okay, and I'm going to create a second question for CSE department. Okay, and there we go. So now if I just log in with the test user, okay, let me just try again. Okay, I am logged in, and in the homework tab we can see that the question has arrived. So let me just open the profile for the student. So by default the student has this kind of profile, and he can fill these and update them later. For example, I'm a CSE student, so I'm going to update it, and it is updated. Okay, so this is the profile for that user, so he's a student. So, and homework tab contains all the questions that I've used, that the staff has posted for that section. So since he is a CSE department, student is going to get the is going to receive the questions of the CSE department. My first answer, for example, and the next question is, I'm going to ask like second answer. Okay, and since he has answered all the questions given by the student, and we can see it in the staff's account, localhost, and I've already logged in as a staff's account here. Log in again, and Okay, so the classes contains all the results. So first the user has to select which department he wants to see the answers. So right now I'm just going to use the CSE department, and this department contains many other users, right? So I have many other students enrolled in that. So I can view the questions and answers of that particular user. So I'm going to use the CSE, and this is the test user profile, the new student, and we can see he has answered to answers to these types of questions. Okay, and this is how we are just going to show them. And let me just add another to the profile of the student. Okay, so I'm going to add unit test marks for that student. So for example, not here, grades. So I'm going to select that user, the new user. I'm going to give them some grades. For example, for 5 subjects I've created some grades, and I'm just going to use them by separated by comma. Yeah, some random grades. Oops, I need to fill the other one as well. Okay. Since I assigned grade for this user, I can now log in as that user. It's because I am logged in as the staff here, and I'm trying to access that. Okay, so now I'm going to log in as the student, and okay, so here if I open the results tab, in this tab many graphs are going to be generated based on his performance in all the 3 tests. Okay, so this is the marks that I've entered in the students tab. So if I so this is the unit test 1 and unit test 2 scores, and the same version with bar chart, and this is the comparison of all the 3 combined together. So 5 subjects, and each students can see their comparison with in the 3 unit tests. So in this in the IP subject, the student has scored low marks in the first unit test but has scored high marks in the next unit test, and so on. So these 3 types of sections are we are going to build, and also the students or staff's functionalities on the respective accounts. Okay, so that's the intro for this, and we're just going to use the CRUD operations with the help of Django models. So all of these, we are creating accounts, we're just assigning grades to the particular students. All these are done with the CRUD operations on the Django models. Okay, and we have provided a Django admin interface in which the staffs can add marks to the student and add questions and for the assignments and so on. So we have seen login registration page, admin interface for staffs, profile, and we have seen that they can assign questions and the staffs can view the students' responses and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to provide you an exact roadmap of how you're going to finish the project. So first we'll just cover the essentials of Django. So the NBT architecture might be confusing, so we're just going to cover that, and then we are just going to build the database with the help of ER diagram. So I have ER diagram built. We are just going to build the Django models for our application. So first we will just implement the login or registration system, so where users can register and login existing users can log in. And then we'll just implement the matplotlib page features that I've just shown you, and then we'll just implement how students are going to answer in their students account, and the responses are going to be viewed in the staff account. So we'll be covering in this pattern, and we're just going to be needing a few things. Python virtual environment. So virtual environment is kind of contains all your packages in a single environment, so that the global packages won't be affected. Your packages for one project will be used for that project only, or if any of the projects you use, it won't disturb the other packages globally, so that all your versions of the Django or any others won't be affected. So we'll be installing that, and Django, as you know, and Matplotlib. We additionally need Pillow, but I believe installing Matplotlib already installs Pillow by default. Okay. So in this video, I'm just going to cover the basic installations and the basics of Django. So first, let me start by installing the virtual environment I told you in my last video. So this is important to keep the projects in an organized way. Say if you have a Python project which has built with Python 3.3 and you want to create another project which requires Python 3.8. Now if you install the Python 3.8 globally, the Python 3.3 project may not be able to like run anymore. So it's like the code is broken. For it to run, you may need to yeah, install the Python 3.3 packages and so on. So in order to avoid those kind of circumstances, we will create an environment, and inside those environment which is going to install the packages for a particular project only. So it will help to maintain a lot of projects that we have. So I'm just going to cd in my project folder and create a new folder called demo. And here in order, I will just create a new environment. So pip so python -m virtual env, and the name of the environment can be whatever you want. I'm just going to call it environment. Okay, the environment is created, and you can see it just created a folder here. So now to activate the environment, just need to navigate to the scripts, and I'm just going to activate the bat file. So activate.bat is a file inside environment and scripts. This is going to enter as is, and can see that we are in this environment for now. So the environment has been created in this step, and we are just activating the environment in this step, and it is indicated by this starting. And in order to deactivate, we can just run the command with deactivate.bat, and it will remove that, and we are no longer in that environment. So we're just going to activate this environment, and while in this environment, we're just going to install Django. So I'm just going to install Django 3.1.5 in this video, but I recommend using Django 2.2 or above. It's because Django 2.2 is known to be around, it will be in the scope for at least 5 years, but I hope Django 3.1.5 will be too. If you want to install any particular Django version, you just provide the version like this and it will install it for you. So I'm just going to install mine as 3.1.5. Okay, so now we have Django installed. We can now start a Django project. So we have to use Django-admin start project, and we just give the name of the project here. So I'll just say demo project and hit install. So it will just create a folder called demo project, and I'm going to cd into this project. Let me open the same project in my atom, and let's see the file structure here. So python project, and okay, so we need to make sure that we are in this manage.py directory, and as well as in the command prompt. You can see when I hit dir, you can see the manage.py. So we are just going to kind of work around it. So since we are in this, we created a project, let's run the project to see what happens. So in order to run the project, we just say python manage.py and run server. We will work on this project by using this python manage.py, and we provide extra arguments, command line arguments like start app and so on. So it's just going to run the project for now. So it says python manage.py and run server. So it is now running on this URL. So this is the local host at port 8000. So I can just copy it and paste it in my browser, and you can see that this shows the Django default page. So it says that our Django has been quite successfully installed, and we are just good to go. You can also use the URL by localhost and at port 8000, and it will just do the same here. So I'm just going to be using localhost colon 8000 for the entire project. Okay, so let's see the Django file structure for now. So manage.py is the actual main file in which it calls the main application and keeps it to run, but we won't be using any of these. And db.sqlite3 is the database that we will use for the project. So after I run this Django admin, it created a database project for me. And you can see that settings.py and urls.py, and we'll just go more of it later. But settings.py actually contains the apps project settings in overall. So a Django project contains several apps. Okay, there might be multiple apps within the same project. It helps to keep the project in an organized way. For example, I can have an app called users, and inside it I can manage all the login, logout, and managing the users logic and so on. And I can have another app for e-commerce where I can just add the logic for buying, selling, and stuff related to e-commerce. Okay, so apps provide those kind of functionalities where we will focus on a particular application and work on, and it provides high reusability as well. We can use this apps created here in other projects or in other types in where we want. Okay, so let's start by creating an app now. So the server is running. Not to stop the server from running, you can use Control C or Command C. Okay, and I'm just going to create a new app. So I'll say python 3 manage.py start app, and I'm just going to call it my app. So this is the name of the app. We can create according to our project, but since this is a demo video, I'm just going to start a simple app here called my app. And you will have noticed this folder called my app is created here, and it contains files like admin.py, models.py, tests, views, and so on. We'll be mainly focusing on models and views. Okay, so Django follows MVT architecture. So M stands for model, V for views, and T for template. Models.py file is actually where we provide the database logic. We don't actually provide any SQL commands. We're just going to create the database tables in Python only. And it's actually very easy to create databases, and it's actually managed. The Python Django framework manages it very well. We're just going to use models.py for that. So where every table will be a class and so on. And we covered the M, which is models, and V is the views. Here we will implement the actual logic for our applications. Just going to use any kind of logic, matplot. So if I want to plot matplotlib, I can use it here. I can use science, scikit-learn, and other kind of Python project codes that the logic will be actually residing in here. Okay, so we'll talk more about on this later. And T stands for template. It's just a HTML file that we are just going to show on the application. So template actually can render something called Django template language. We'll be able to use Python, a bit of Python code there, but it's quite a bit different. We'll talk about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just going to use the urls.py for this project. Okay, so a project contains urls.py. An app can contain urls.py as well, but I don't have any urls.py here. I'll just create it in a bit later on. Okay, so you can see a path called admin here. It means that whenever your user after this localhost 8000, whatever he types something here, so if it is an admin, we're just going to route him to this particular logic. Okay, so since I have admin, it'll just be it's provided by Python by default. We'll just be implementing more of these. So I can have another path like this, and which means it just says this page. Okay, so right now this page is hosted by the Django default page, and I didn't provide any logic for it to here, and I did not save it, and I did not run it actually. So whenever this means like whenever the user hits only the domain name, which is localhost, and if we actually if we have actually deployed the project, whatever the domain name, the default kind of the home page will be provided by this logic. Okay, so localhost 8000 will be removed, and whatever comes after it will be handled by this logic. So I'm just going to handle this logic in the my app that I created. Okay, so I'm just going to use include. This might feel a bit strange for now, but I'll just show you in a bit what we are exactly doing. So include my app dot URLs. Okay, so before that I forgot to mention an important thing. Whenever we hit start app command, we just need to go to settings.py as soon as possible, because we might forget, and we should include this app inside this installed apps list. Okay, so I created an app called my app. I'm going to type here dot apps dot my app config. So it's just the name of the app, the first letter is capitalized followed by a config, or you can just copy this last bit from this class name in the apps.py. So this is the class name, and that's what we are exactly providing here. So we are just actually saying to the Django that we have a project and we created an app called my app. I want to include this app to this Django project. That's what we are exactly saying. Without this, Django will not consider this application. So what I'm doing is, whenever there's a URL called localhost 8000 without any like admin or anything so on, I'm just going to like forward this to my urls.app. So right now we're just in the project's URLs, but apps can contain their own URLs. So I'm going to create urls.py, and it should be exact this name of the file. Okay, here I'm just going to get this. Okay, so let me just go to views.py for now. So views.py, as I said, it contains the logic for our application. So I'm going to create a function called home here, and it will take a request object, and I'm going to return something, an HTML file, an HTML document property. So I'm going to say from django.http import http response with h and t capitalized here. I'm going to return an http response. Inside it, I'm just going to say hello world. So you know HTML how it goes, like h1 tag and hello world, and I'm just closing this HTML tag. Okay, so what I'm trying to actually achieve is, I'm just going to render this HTML tag that says hello world to this URL. So whenever I hit this localhost 8000, it should display this hello world message. Okay, so it is in the views.py in hello world. So we just need to tell Django that that our URL should point to this views function. Okay, so right now you have transmitted the URL, you kind of passed the URL to app specifically. So we have this app, so whatever URL comes down with this, it is going to forward it to apps. And then in the urls.py, I'm just going to, this is an app urls.py. So I'm just going to copy this code, the path, I don't need to include there, and I'm just going to paste it. Okay, and here I'm going to copy this list, but I won't be needing this admin and all, because it's already taken care of by the main project. So here I'm just telling, let me import views now. So from dot import views. So what I'm telling is, in this directory, which is the urls.py is here, right? And in the same directory there's a file called views.py. and from that I'm just going to import views from this directory. Okay, and views contain a function called home, right? I've created a function called home, and it will return a HTTP response. And I'm just going to use this views.home, and I'll just provide a name here, users home. I'm sorry, my app home. This is because many apps can contain the same keyword like home. In order to differentiate the my apps home, I'm just going to say like my apps home. Yeah, it's not like compulsory, we can have any name we want, just to be specific enough. So up till here, what I've done is I created a new app and included in my installed app settings, and I've saved it. And in this main project app, I'm just saying whenever a URL contains an empty string after the local host, I'm just going to let the my app take care of it. So my app.urls is going to take care of it from now. So after that, you'll just be coming here to this url.py here, and I'm just going to import views. What I'm saying is whenever a path like this without any string comes on, I'm just going to call this function views.home. Okay, so views.home, what it does is going to return an HTTP response that says h1 hello world. So if I save all of these and run this application now, python 3 manage.py run server. Oh, my app is not defined. It should be in a string, my bad. Okay, so it's just like a live server. So whenever I hit save on any of these major files, it will just reload the server itself. I don't need to like run it every time. But so now if I run it, you can see the hello world is displayed here. Okay, so that's how we are just going to render the HTML. But I'm not going to add HTML here. Like it will be probably hundreds of lines, and I don't want to mess the views. So for that, I can say, yeah, what I can do is I'm just going to create an HTML file. So I'm not going to create an HTML file directly. There's a template hierarchy here. So inside this my app, I'm just going to create a new folder called templates. And inside this template, I'm just going to create an exact folder with the name of the app. So it should be like this: my app, templates, and again my app. And only in this folder, I'm just going to create the new HTML file. I'm just going to call it test.html. Okay, and here I'm just going to use the HTML syntax, and I'm going to use this is from the template. So here I render the HTML directly, but I just need to route this request whenever a request comes in. I'm just going to render an HTML page here. Okay, so right now this is not linked, so I can do is return render request. Yeah, I'll just talk about the request object in a bit. So this is residing, there's test.html residing in my app slash test.html. So you might be confused with this path, but by default the templates will be searched in this my app and templates, and here it will be searched. But in order to differentiate from many apps, I'm just going to create a new folder here, my app, and inside it I'm going to create test.html. It is just how Django recommends it. We can create it inside the templates directly without this folder, but it helps us to keep it organized. So what I'm saying is I'm going to pass this request object, and I'm using the HTML template which I've just shown here. So if I save it now and run this, yep, now it says this is from the template. Okay, so that's exactly how we're just going to build it. In order to avoid like hundreds of HTML lines of code and to maintain it easily, we're just going to do this. Okay, so with this in mind, up next we're just going to import the logic for our application, probably starting with models.py. Okay, so now I'm just going to delete the demo application and do something relevant to our home. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this entire folder. Okay, so I deleted the old demo application that we built, and I'm going to create a new app, and let me create a new app, and I'm going to call it users. So Python manage.py start app users. Okay, so I need to delete this from settings.py and also from yours.py. Okay. Okay, our users app is created, and I'm going to add this in the settings.py. So that will be users.apps.users.config. Yep. Okay, so now we have a models.py, and inside it we are just going to create the database logic models. But before that, we need to focus on the most important thing, that is the database models. Okay, so this is the ER diagram, so it's the entity relationship diagram, and this is exactly how we are just going to build the database. Okay, and it contains a lot of database terms like one-to-one, many-to-one, and so on, but I'll just try to be as simple as possible in explaining all of these things. But this is going to be the most important part of the application. We're just going to build just that, and we are just going to use the CRUD operations on these. Okay, so we're just going to start from user table. So everything is a table here, and this is a column. So ID is a column, username is a column, and email is a column. And the user table has password as well, but we won't be able to access the passwords. So we're just going to I ignore the password. So I'm going to create a table called user, and it has these names. Okay, and one user is going to have exactly one profile. Alright, so the profile contains additional details like bio, skills, area of interest, and his GitHub or LinkedIn accounts, and so on. So since one user can have one profile only, obviously, because many users cannot have many profiles. I mean, one user cannot have many profiles, or many profiles. One profile will not be belonging to many users, right? One user should have one profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a relationship between these two tables as one-to-one. So that's how it says one user is going to have only one profile, and the next user is going to have a different profile. But either way, there's just going to be one associated with one user. So that's what we try to say with one-to-one. Okay, so here in this we have a ID as primary key. So primary key is nothing like it. Every column in the database should be an entry, and it should be unique. So no two columns should be same. For example, I have a user called user1, and I have another user called user1, and first name and last name as like both of them have the same first name last name. In that case, the entries may be same, but it should not be the case. Every row should have a unique way of identifying it. So if I have two users as with the same name, how am I going to say like I'm going to apply operation on only the first user and not the second user? So that is identified by primary key ID. So even though they have same names, the serial number is kind of like a serial number, it is going to be different for every user. So every table has an ID. Okay, so the profile contains the ID and the user object, which is just going to relate these two tables. Okay, so one to one, I'm just going to use this is the one to one object that is going to relate these two tables. And section, yeah, we'll come back to this after we implemented this section. But for now, these are just like character fields, image field for having the profile picture, skills, and everything is just a character field. Okay, so and then we are just going to implement section, right? So it means every user is going to be in a section, in a particular section. So if I have three departments, for example, computer science, IT, and EC, or anything, few students or few profiles will belong to a particular section. Example, CSE. And second, or few other users are going to be in another department, for example, IT. So this means that one section is going to contain multiple profiles, right? That's how we are trying to say that. So EC or CSE is a department, it is one department, and inside it there are going to be many profiles. That's how we are going to say. And IT is going to be another department, but it is one section, and it's going to be having multiple profiles inside it, and EC and IT and so on. So one section is going to have particular many number of students. That is called one to many. So from section we can say that it is related to the profile with one to many. But from profile point of view, you're just going to implement that section is going to be section is related with profile as many to one. Okay, so many profiles can be in one section. So profile is related with section as many to one, and section is related to profile as one to many. In Django, we are just going to use foreign key for many to one. Django does not directly provide one to many. So I would like to say that one section has multiple profiles. I can use this section, and like this I can use profile, and and I can say one to many. But Django does not provide one to many, so it provides only many to field. So this is the many side. Profile is on the many side, right? So in this we are just going to say many to one as section. Okay, so if it's not clear, I'll say in simple terms. Django provides only many to one path, and this three arrow marks, yeah, it's kind of like a branch, right? It indicates that this side is going to be on the many side, and this side is going to be on the one side. Okay, Django provides many to one, so we're just going to start from many and going to be ending at one. It does not provide like one to many. If the arrow mark is like, yeah, it's not the yeah, one to many. If Django provided one to many, I would just use profile object here, and this section is related to profile as one to many. But since we are just going to use many to one, and it's kind of efficient to use many to one as well, so we won't be able to see any one to many. We'll just use the many side on which the many is related. Okay, so but that does not, yeah, that's not really important for now. So for explaining the ER diagram, it's going to say it's suffice that one section is going to have multiple profiles. Okay, and now when the teacher tries to assign a question, it indicates that he will assign one question so to a particular section. So for CSE departments, he is going to question only in like CSE questions, and for EC's types of questions will be different. So while choosing a question, she will select a department. Okay, so one section is going to have multiple questions, right? For CSE questions, for CSE department, there might be 2 or 3 questions or hundreds of questions related to that particular section. And for EC department, there can be hundreds of questions. So it is related to one to many as well, right? And then one question will be answered by multiple users, right? So for that, that means that one question is going to have multiple answers. So one profile would have answered one question, and another profile would have answered the same question, and three, four different students might want to add the same questions, right? So that's why you have one to many with answer. Many answers are going to be associated with one question, and also profile is going to be related with answer. So one profile is going to have multiple answers, right? So one student, so if there are five questions, that student should be able to answer all the five questions. So one profile has multiple answers, right? And yep, just so since profile is related to many to one, I've used many to one here, and question is also related to many one, and used many to one here. And grade, yeah, grade is can be implemented in section as well, but I wanted to show it separately because it's quite, we have matplotlib functions, so I thought it would be better to have it as one to one. So one profile is going to have one grade object associated with it, and his grade object contains his unit test 1 marks, unit test 2 marks, unit test 3 marks, and so on, right? So his profile is going to have all the results in a single table. So that makes easy to implement that. Just going to relate the ER diagram and actually the models of our app in our Django project. Okay, so I do have this old models.py. So this is my file in which the project is actually complete. So I'm just going to copy everything and explain it over there. Okay, Control A and Control V. Right. So we need to start by, this is just the default import. We need to have this for every model. And first I'll just show you how they are related to this PPT I just shown you. Right. So here is the user class, user table. So except for the user table, we're just going to, Django provides already a user table with contains like username, password, and so on. But email is an extra field that we are going to add it ourselves, and we will see it in a different section. Okay, but for now the focus is, I'm just going to show you how profile is actually, like how the ER diagram is actually made in the Django models. So assume that we have already have created a table like this, and then we are just going to proceed from there. So we'll start with profile. So as I said, and also the primary keys are going to be provided by Django automatically. So if I don't have any primary key, any what is this? Yeah, the column that says primary key, Django is actually automatically going to create it for me. It's because every table should contain a primary key. It should be able to uniquely identify a row or an entry, right? So that's why Django provides for us, and I did not bother to create it myself here. So the ID is provided by Django, and now we can see the user is just one-to-one with the user object, user class. So that means we're just going to get the user class. So since it is provided by Django, assume that it's already a table created by us, just like this. So I'm just going to pass it as a one-to-one field here, and I'm just calling the instance as user. So this is a user. So whenever we just fill the profile for a student, that student's user will be added here. So that student will have a user instance. We're just going to pass like profile dot user is equal to that particular instance of that user, right? And then we'll just go as it is, but it might sound confusing. It's because Django models is not like SQL. It is way better it is way easier than actually providing it SQL, but the simplicity, it just like first time it might seem confusing. So it is now saying that I want to create a one-to-one relationship with this profile and user, and I'm going to use the instance of this user as user, this small underscore, the underscore, the lowercase letters, right? And then section. So I have this section as many to one. So since section is going to be a class that is defined after profile, I need to provide this in double quote. Otherwise it won't be recognized. But if the profile is already created, right, it's the grade class is above the profile. So I'm just going to use it as like this. So it's kind of like the forward declaration that we are doing. So the section is going to be many to one. So foreign key represents the many to one. Okay, there's not one to many and so on. This is exactly used as many to one. So that's why I'm just using every field as many to one instead of one to many, as I told you. And every other is just going to be a normal image field, character field, and so on. These rest of these are just some details about the user, the profile. Sorry. So ID is provided by default. User and sections are the two objects that the profile is going to use. Everything else is just additional information. Okay, so and then yeah, you can ignore this for now. I'll say yeah, I'll extend the details when I'm just going over the profile sections, when we are just going to implement the profile for users. Okay, and this string, yeah, so whenever we just output an object, we're just going to say that it's going to return a nice format like this. Otherwise it'd be like saying things like profile object 1, profile object 2, and so on. So whenever we query on a profile object, we ask it to return in a nice way. So it is like self dot user contains a username. So we're just accessing the username provided by the user class. So I told you, like, assume that we have created a table called user that contains username. So we're just displaying name of the user and along with the profile detail. Okay, and the others, like, yeah, the grade object contains the user object, the one-to-one, and the unit test, which is just a character field. So the unit test can be implemented by using like one mark, one subject for every unit test, but I've decided to use it as a char field for simplicity sake. And it's, yeah, for a project like this, it's going to be fine for now because it's going to be containing only five users, I mean 5 subjects, and only few users. So for, but in real LMS project, but it is going to have a separate subject for a separate column for every subject, right? And so in order to, you might have seen the results tabulation, the results page, it contained 9 graphs. In order to store those plots, I've used matplotlib's help. So everything is just an image in the results tab. So there are nine images, in which 3 of them are bar charts, 3 of them are pie charts, and yeah, one contains all the 3 line charts. So there will be actually 9 images, so a comparison between, but I think we have just used only 7 images, so we didn't really use these, but we might if we want in the future. Okay, and yeah, everything is just how I've described it in the ER diagram. The question contains a section object and a question field. So the ID is provided by default, and section is just a foreign key, and the question field is the actual question. So this, everything contains the diffs, everything contains the default string, so that when we query on it, it will just display it in nice fashion, right? So we have implemented the models, and up next we'll be starting with users, profiles, and yeah, getting with them. But before that, let me show you a quick way to create few user. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a new super user. So manage.py create super user. Okay, so create super user is just the staff user that we might want to create. So this kind of user will have perfect authority over the Django database models. So this user can control every Django database objects, and he can delete it, create one, and so on. Okay, yeah, so we have this models file, but we need to actually store it in the database. By just, it will not be enough if we just store it in the, if we just save the file. We need to run a few commands called migrations. Okay, so python manage.py make migrations. So this will just prepare the database to actually, yeah, to actually just like verify all these structures, and it will have the database migrations in a separate file. So whenever we feel like if we want to make the changes to actually save it in the database, we'll just use migrate. Okay, so let me just install this quickly. Pip install below. Okay, okay, so I just want to make python manage.py make migrations. So this will create a list of files that it says like the migrations have been created. But in order to actually create the changes into the database, you can think it like as committing to the database. You can make python manage.py migrate. So now our database is actually created. You can see the, we can open the SQL file, SQLite file if we want, and check all the tables, but it will just contain all the these respective tables along with the columns of these. Okay, so now I can just create a super user. So super user requires a user object, this user class. So that's why it did not, so since we did not have this model applied to the database, it did not allow me to. Okay, so first it just asks me for my username. So I'm just going to use like first user, and email address something like it doesn't exist, test@gmail.com, and I'm going to give testing at 123 as the password for every database or for every users. So since I've created a super user, now we can just run the python server, run server command. Spelling is wrong. So it has my login details. So first testing at 123. Okay, so inside you can see that we have groups and users. Okay, so users contain all the, like the first user my details. So this is where my information lies. So my password is encrypted, and I can provide additional details, and away we go. So only super users can have access to this admin page, and that's what we are trying to give to staff users, right? For our application, students won't be able to use this admin interface, but staffs can. So he can, yeah, the staff can add a new user, and I can call it second user. I'll provide the same password, and I want to switch. Okay, so it will just ask me to provide an status for this user. So I can provide a super user status, which is the most powerful, like the current user I am using, but I can even make it as a normal user, right? But I won't be needing any of this, and I won't save this as well. Okay, so this is how we are going to create a super user, and for example this can be our first staff user example, right? Yeah, I'll just continue using the second user for I want to show you something. Okay, and I'm going to save it. So in order for me to access the database elements, so python manage.py shell. Okay, so I'm going to use an Python interactive prompt, but it is not the normal Python interactive prompt that we will be using. So it loads all the Django framework necessary details, and others. So we can just use from django.contrib.auth.models import user. Okay, so this is just the import. I'll just use the default for the user. So I'm going to query to find the user. So I can say user dot. So I can clear the screen for now and make it in the center. Okay, so user dot objects dot all. Okay, so this will give a query set that contains every object. So this is an object, this is an object, right? And in order to access the first user, I can say id equals 1. I'm sorry, username all. So get id equals 1. Okay, so all will I've entered a wrong query here. So all will fetch current query set that contains every user ever created for this user models. Okay, not to get a particular one, we're just going to have user.objects.get id equal to 1. So I said like this database contains, every table contains a default id equal to 1. Since we are having user, it always contains some username and so on. So I'm trying to get the id equals 1. So if I get id equals 2, you can say that okay, does not exist. I wonder why it's not existing. Okay, okay, what is the id of the second user then? So I'm just going to say user dot objects dot filter username equals second user. Okay, so I'm just going to get the first instance dot id. Okay, 3. Okay, all right. So what I've done is I was trying to use an id method on this. So I have the first user's id and I was trying to use the second user. But if you remember, I created the same user called second user with, I mean, it does not matter if I use the same user or not, but I deleted the object, right? Instead of saving it, I created the object but deleted it right away. The id, no matter what, if we delete it or not, the id will keep on incrementing. So that's why the new user had the id of 3. Okay, so that's how we're just going to filter the query sets. So we can have another query set called filter. Okay, so if we try to use filter and username equals user, you can see it returns a query set, right? Filter returns multiple objects. Okay, but if you try to use it as get, it will return a single object, because get is always supposed to receive only one object. But filter, there may be many users with the username called second user. It will fetch all the all the user objects that has the name of second user. Okay, so that's why in order to get the id of it, I've used user.objects.filter. So I know that the username of the the username I want to search is second user. So I'll provide filter, or I can just use get as well. If I use get, I need not provide the first. Okay, so first we'll get the first object from the query set, but since I use get method on it, I don't need to use the first object because it is the only object actually. It works on the query set, right? So I can use dot id. Okay, so since it's a query set, I fetch the user object where the username equal to second user, and I want the id of it. So id contains the ID of the user. So if I want to use filter, I have to use this won't work because it is not an object right now, it is a query set. So first we have to get the object and then get the ID. Okay, so get is actually fine for us. So this is how we just query the database. So ID, username are just provided by the default user panel here, provided by the user. So it contains this table that contains username, ID, and so on. So if we have a profile and we are trying to use access the elements, we won't be using by like username. So if we have a profile dot objects dot filter, username won't work because the profile does not have a username column here. I can use image, bio, skills, whatever, but it won't. The username won't work. ID will work because it is by default every tables have an ID. So this is how we query our own database. There's actually a lot of ways how we are just going to do it, but this will serve as an intro. So as the project further proceeds, we'll just see how to make more complicated queries and so on. In this video, we're just going to see the basic logic behind the register page. Okay, so now we have created users and models of profile and so on, but since we did not create any profiles, grades, other tables, we have it in the database, but we did not store any objects in the table. So all we have now is a super user, like first and second user as I've shown you. So the user table provides with options like username, password, and password confirmation. Okay, so this is exactly how it provided by default. Email is the one I've added it myself. So let's see how it actually works. So we have this, in this we have a register view. Okay, I'm just going to start from the scratch. Okay, so whenever a URL called register appears, we're just routing it to user views dot register, and where the name is equal to register. I mean, we have named it register, so it will be used in the HTML template. It will be, we can use it like with some ginger tags, which is for the Django template language feature. So whenever a register is chosen by the user, this views register is open. So what I've done here is I've imported user views. Okay, so from users app, from our application, right, I've created an app called users. From that I've called views, which is the main logic of our application. Okay, so in this views, as you can see, there's a function called register. So whenever there's a request for this page, we will just we'll just make it run this register page. I can make it as I can make it inside the app as well, like this, but I wanted the URL to be in this main project app instead of the users urls.py. Okay, but we will implement both of those. So whenever that page is requested, it will return this view file. Okay, so here we have the register. So we are going to render a form. So for the first time, if the user is coming without any post request, it means it is going to the register page for the first time. It means we have not clicked on the sign up button yet. So for the first time, we are just rendering this user register form. So what is this user register form? So it is a form that we have created in the forms.py. Okay, so this is the user registration form. So as I've told you, in the models.py, we have a user which we imported from the Django's like default model. Okay, so it contains username, password, and so on. Okay, so we are just kind of extending the user models. Okay, so in the forms.py, so forms.py is actually very useful to have. So I will tell you that later why we are using forms. Right now we have these username, password, and password 2. Okay, and email is the extra field that I want from Django. Okay, so in order to tell Django that I want this email, I want to use email and forms.email field, right? So since I have this forms.email field, I now then can implement a meta class, and I have to yeah, I have to let the Django user form know that I'm going to use a model of user. So I've used imported the model here as well. So from that user there are fields like username, password and password too. I've implemented a new field that I want to be in this user model as well. So that's how I told it. So now the model has four fields actually. Okay, so whenever I render this form, so this form contains the exactly you are seeing this four fields, right? So whenever I render this form, it's just going to show an empty four fields for now. But when I click on sign up, it will fill all the necessary details here. So there will be two types of implementations. For the first time, the user did not hit the sign up button. He just come to this register page for the first time. And if the second option is if he has done a post method on that page, either he's going to either he's going to come to the register page for the first time, or he's going to fill the details and sign up and we'll go to the same page again. So for the first time we'll just render this empty form, the four of these, and then we are just going to render the request and users. We're just going to forward this to the register HTML. So right now we have just created a form, but it is not rendered in the HTML yet. So for that we are just going to pass the form as a dictionary. Okay, so dictionary, we can create any key, and we're just going to create this, pass this object from the user registration form. Okay, this form contains four empty fields but is not rendered yet. Not to render, we have to use it in this register page. So this is the Django template language. You can see this is the HTML, but along with this you can see the curly braces inside which few like Python codes. It's not exactly Python, but it's almost most has few Python syntax and few other syntax as well. Okay, so I'm just going to pass this form object here as a dictionary, and I'm going to render it as here. Okay, so crispy is another one we have, in order to use the forms in a good way, it will include like these extra details, and whenever I make any mistakes, for example first user, and if I try to sign in, okay, it will just ask me to fill everything. I've provided wrong password and it says the user name already exists, so it's all provided by the crispy form. Okay, we need to install these, but overall we're just rendering this form object that we have shown. Okay, so for the first time this will be rendered. Okay, and then we are back to views. So whenever the user clicks on the sign up button, what happens is we are just validating the form. Okay, so here the user registration form request contains all the details that I have just entered. Okay, it contains test.company.com, first user, password 1 and password 2. So this contains everything, and the post data we're just passing to this form. Okay, user registration form. So it will be kind of like a dictionary actually. So it will just fill the respective values to this to the forms. Okay, so it has four fields, right? Username, first user will be assigned username, and email will be assigned this, and password and password 2 will be assigned. Okay, and we are creating a form object as well, and then we are kind of validating the form. If the form passes all these without any errors, right, and then we are just safe to create an user registering at that instant. Okay, so if there is no error, we can save the form. Else if there's any error, we should not save it, right, because it's not the first user already exists, there cannot be two usernames, right? So those kind of problems will arise. So only if the form is valid, it, yeah, it does all the basic authentication itself. It knows that we these two passwords should be same, and the username should be like, yeah, the username should be unique and so on. And then we're just like getting the username, and then we are assigning it to the username to have a message successfully shown. Okay, so whenever I create a new user, it it will create, yeah, just a message just for the front end. Yeah, we don't need to worry about for now, and it will redirect to the login page. Okay, so whenever I create a third user, I'm testing at 123, testing at 123, sign up. This is the message I shown you, account create for the third user. So we're just getting the username and making it a message success. So this is messages we are just going to import from yeah, Django, and it will show a message in a good way. Okay, it will be in the base.html. I'll explain it later, but okay. And then after the form is saved, we're just going to redirect the user to the login page. Okay, third user already exists. Okay, it did not redirect to the login page for some reason, but okay, we'll fix it when we are actually working on the project. So forms.py provides all this necessary details. So it will just, whenever we create an instance and we pass in the request.post, it will create the form object necessarily, and we can then save the form. And it will, the saving the form means we are just saving it to the database as well. It's directly related to the models, and it will actually save it in the database as well in a neat way. So we can validate the form and also save through the database by creating one form for that corresponding database, right? We just need to provide which model is going to save, and it will save the necessary username, and it will save to the database. So that's how the registration page actually works. Okay, so we yeah, the front end is just having a sign up button, and if they already have an account, just using a sign in button for the user to actually use. So let me just talk about the base.html here. So you can see this contains all these pages, but I have not included any of the navigation bar or footer here. It's because I want to use in every other pages like login and so on. So I just provided in everything in a neat simple file, a single file called base.html. Okay, so it is just normal HTML. Load static, we'll talk about later. It contains the static images that's going to be shown, and this is the navigation bar. I just copied from the bootstrap. Okay, I will come to this later when we are actually making login pages. So here we have the navigation bar, and here we have the footer. Okay, so this stuff is going to be same across all the many pages, right? Home page is containing the same navigation bar and footer and so on. So what we can do for reusability is, okay, we can ignore this for now. So we are providing a block called content and end block content. Okay, so it's just a name that we are going to give. So within this, the other pages are going to be yeah, using these pages. So what I'm trying to say here is, we have this register HTML. So it extends from users base.html. So it contains every code that the base.html has. So we don't need to copy paste and all. So we have this block content, right? So the register page has to be unique in its own way. The home page will contain this details. The register page contains these other details. So those details are going to be in this block content for a page. So for that's why we need to start by block content, and within block content we're just providing every details that we want for that register page. So for example, home.html contains only the home page within this block. We are extending the users based on HTML, and we are just providing this. Okay, that's simple. Okay, so now we need to import the login page, login features, right? So register page is actually kind of different for every type of website. So some may require email and others require many lot of information for registering. So we implemented the register details ourselves. But login is always going to be same for every type of website. It's just going to be username and password. Okay. So since it's going to be repeated for many websites, Django provides a built-in login page. So we're just going to implement that. So let me open the projects. Yeah, I'll open the projects, settings.py and urls.py. Okay, so first let's focus on urls.py. So login and logout. So we are just going to import views as authorization views from Django contrib.auth. This contains all the login details that we will be needing, right? So whenever a user requests a login page or logout page, from this view, I'm going to call it as auth view here. So there's a view called login, and it's a class-based view. So we're just going to use as view. But in our project, we have most of these as function, right? We don't have any class yet, but we will implement class-based view later on. For example, here. But for now, the urls.py, yeah, this contains the login view as a class view. So not to use them, we have to provide the as view and template name for the login. Okay, so Django provides every authorization and every kind of details that are necessary for our login. We just need to provide which template we need to give whenever the user gives the login path as a request. Okay, so we have provided a name equal to login. So whenever the login is selected, it is going to render this HTML. But every other view, we don't have to have any view that I have shown you. We have this register view, right? We don't have to write any kind of views for login because it's provided by Django. We just need to provide the template after which is going to render. So it will complete this view and it will render to this login page. So the login page is here. Okay, so here we have the same kind of actions. Okay, so I'm just going to have a form. So form, we don't have to worry about it as well. Only in the register page we have created this form and passed it as a context, but Django has already passed it by default to this login page, so we don't need to do anything for it, right? So whenever it calls this login view, this view actually has passed a context called form, and we are just implementing here, and we are just showing as crispy, so it's going to be neat and provides every type of authorization. Okay, and there's a sign in button, and yeah, need an account that goes to register. So this is what I told you. So in here we just provide the URLs like this. In href we provide this ginger tag, this curly braces, and we have this %, and inside this we having a URL that says to us to go to register. Okay, it's because we have given it the name as register. So whenever the user has a register, we have given it as the name as register. So this will forward to the, so whenever we click on create an account, it will forward to the register page. So it means that the user needs to create an account, but he's not going to log in. Okay, so this is two kinds of text. So here we are just rendering the context inside two curly braces. Okay, and here we are just using this kind of action for URLs. And one more thing, so whenever you use form, even in the register page, we need to have this CSRF token. Okay, So this is just an additional security feature provided by Django. Like no other computers can have request to this authorization. So it will provide safety to the user by providing this token. It is included whenever there's a we are just creating a form. Okay, so this is important. Otherwise, it won't work actually. Okay, so since we are rendering it, and every other action like the register view will be taken care of by Django. Okay, so that's what we provided here. Name equal to login. Okay, so the login is quite over, and we'll just see about another type of, yeah, the users profile and other type of. Okay, so now we since have the how the login and registration page works, it's time to go to the profile implementation. Okay, so profile contains these basic information. So if I go to login as an admin here, let me go localhost slash admin. Okay, so I'm logging as my admin account. So here you can see all the models that I have added from the database. So in our admin.py, here there was actually nothing like this here. So by default, the admin is this. So you don't have any admin.py here. So it only provides this user feature, and so here we have the list of all the users. So by default, the user is provided by the admin. Okay, then what I did is I imported everything from the models.py. So models.py contain tables like grade, question, answer, section, and profile. I copied all the 5 tables. I imported all the 5 tables into this admin.py. Okay, and then here I'm just going to render them. So in order to make these tables available in the Django admin, I'm just using admin.site.register and my imported grade, question, answer, section profile. I imported answer section profile just by having answer section profile directly into this admin. So that means I want every fields from the database models. So that means I have 3 fields here, right? The question, user, and answer field. Okay, and in the admin.py I want all the 3 fields in this answer.py as well, but I want to restrict access to grade and question. Okay, so for that I'm just going to create a class, and this is just a name that you can give anything, and admin.modeladmin, it will extend this class. Okay, and inside it I'm going to use fields equal to user, ut1, ut2, and ut3. Okay, this will just restrict only this options to be displayed at the admin page. Okay, so I go to grades, and if I open this or add a new grade, it'll just allow me to use these, yeah, only these 4 options: user, ut1, ut2, and ut3. But in reality my models does have a lot of other columns for the, yeah, for the grade option, but I'm not displaying any of those. So that's how it's done. So I'm just going to say that I want only these fields to be displayed in the admin grade. It's because these other fields are going to be created at the runtime for the user. It's not like I'm going to add an image for the matplotlib and so on. These are just matplotlib graphs that are going to be saved. Okay, so I'm restricting only these 4 columns to be shown in the admin, and as well as in the question as well. Okay, I'm restricting only question field and section, but in reality it has question field and section, but I don't need that. But I just wanted to show you that it is possible to do it like this way. Now since I have all of these tables in the admin, I can just create any instance that I want here itself. Okay, so providing every staff authority for the user. So I can go to section, add a new section, right? New section, and it will just add me, and I can delete it if I want. Yep, it will delete it for me. And my actions will be recorded here, right? I've added new section, but I deleted it immediately, and these are the recent actions that I've done in this Django admin. Okay, so this is how we are just going to implement everything. And what I wanted to show here is, by default we have many users, right? But users don't have profiles as of now. So I created these old profiles in my account, but any new user will not be able to have an account. So there are this many users, but not every one of them has a profile. So first let's implement the profile for now. So the profile has username, email, and the image, that's for their profile picture, and skills, area of interest, GitHub, and LinkedIn. So this information takes user table. So username and email belongs to the user table, right? So in the models.py, it is the default models provided by the user table, username and email. But every other image, bio, skills, area of interest, GitHub, and LinkedIn are provided by the profile class. So these are all from the profile class. So here we are just having two types of tables, but in the register form we had only one type of table, that is only the user. Okay, it's because the register form had only username, email, password, and password too. But the profile does have the three of those that I just told you, I mean the two tables. So in order to implement that, we're just going to create a form as well. So in the register we created forms, right? And let me just show you. So in the user registration form, we had all the 4 fields that are going to be saved to the database. But here, I'm just going to implement 2 of these. So this is the profile form, these 2. So one form is just going to be getting the user profile, user model, and the other is going to get the profile model. It's because we told you that it gets 2 types of table, right? So 2 tables. So I need 2 tables. One is user and one is profile. Okay, what fields are going to be displayed in the in the email? I'm sorry. What fields are going to be displayed from the user table? So we know that user table contains username, password, and password too. We don't need to actually make them change the password. So what I'm going to do is just going to allow them to have access only to changing their email and username. Okay, so here I provided only 2 fields. So from this user table, even though there are many other options such as password, I'm getting only these 2, and hence that I'm just getting 2 of these forms. 2 of these fields in that form. And in the profile update form, I'm just going to have fields such as image, bio, skills, area of interest, GitHub, and LinkedIn. So profile contains many options like user, section, and so on, but I'm just going to have render only these fields. So that's why I provided these fields. So since we have these 2 forms ready, we're just going to create an instance of both of these, and I'm just going to render in the HTML page. So that is provided by the views. So whenever the profile URL comes in, I'm just going to route it to the profile views. I just imported the profile, right? So in that view, I have those 2 kinds of form, profile form and user form. And if you remember for register form, right, I just got this form. So I just imported this form here. I should close many of these. Settings, admin, I won't be needing it. Okay, so for registration form, I imported a form. So that is like from dot forms. Yeah, from dot forms I imported this user registration form. So I created an instance of that form, and for the first time it will just yeah, have the empty form. When the user clicks on submit, it will just check the form and save the details in the database. So right now it is exactly like this, but since we have two tables and two types of form for the profile, user and profile, we're just going to get an instance of both of these forms. Okay, and the rest is exactly the same. Request.post, we are just passing the instance as request.user. So this because in the register there are only four fields. Okay, so I just need to use request.post only. Okay, that means the user would have entered username, email, password, and password 2. And the user registration forms also has only four fields: username, email, password 1, and password 2. So it will just get the dictionary. So this dictionary contains few the key as username and the value submitted by the user, and the next key will be email and the value submitted by user, and so on. So for this there will be a dictionary of four elements. So it will be like automatically filled in the form, and when I hit the save, the four fields will be saved in the database. Okay, I mean in the table will be correspondingly matching. But here in the forms.py I got only username, email, and image, bio, skills, AI, and GitHub, and these things. But in the profile there are actually many fields than that: user and section. Okay, user is actually very necessary because every user is going to have every profile is going to have only one user. So we need to provide for which user we are actually creating this profile, right? So for this additional information, we need to give instance equal to request.user. This request contains, I mean, since it is a logged in, it is definitely going to contain request.user, because without any user, the profile page will not be first displayed for them. So after they are logged in, it contains an additional property called request.user. This contains the user details such as the name and so on. So this is then just an object, and we are just giving it as an instance. So now the extra field is satisfied. Request.post will contain the additional details. So request.post will have username and email, so it will be saved in this form, and the additional details such as instance, it needs instance as well, right? Which user is actually the profile is created for, that object is passed, and it will be saved accordingly. And for profile update form, we have bio, skills, like AOI, GitHub, and LinkedIn. So these are all character fields, these four. So these will be available in the request.post. But image is the image field, right? It will be available in the request.files. So since we are updating a profile picture as well, we need to give it an argument called request.file. And also it needs a user instance as well. So we are providing the user instance. Okay. So that's exactly, everything else is just the same as the registration form. So first when the login from the profile is viewed, we're just implementing an empty form to be rendered. So empty form in the sense that it will just have the basic already existing details if there is any. Okay, so it is passing the instance. So it is not just an empty form. If the details are already filled, this page is going to render with that information. See, I mean I did not fill this, but for registration form everything was empty. That's why we did not give anything here. But since this information may be already available, we're just passing the instance as request.user and user.profile. So if there is not anything already, so I mean there is not these five fields, then we can just enter an empty instance. Okay, but every time the user will have to enter all the details. So now we have created an instantiated form with this pre-filled data using these. So whenever the user updates something or deletes or add anything, it will just be added in request.post. So now we're just getting all the details and if the form is valid, both of the forms are valid, we're just going to save both of the forms, and it is going to have a success message. Okay, so this success message will be displayed in the yeah, in base.html as a format. Okay, so since the how this is how the profile details are actually updated, so we're just going to now render profile.html. So profile.html will be okay. So here we are just rendering the user.username. So this is an account heading, right? User.username and user.email. Yes, so many other information. And if there is a GitHub account, yeah, this is just some information here. So if I provide a GitHub account, http, I think it's https. So it will just allow me to have a GitHub symbol here, but it will just a symbol that go to github.com, the link I provided. So it's for manual rendering. If I have a LinkedIn profile, the LinkedIn button will appear here. So if I don't have a GitHub account, the button will disappear. So that's yeah, that's how I'm implementing these. If there is a yeah, the user contains a GitHub account, this that means it is not empty. Then I'm just like having a href and placing an image for the GitHub that is from the font awesome, and like us for LinkedIn. So it's just all the forms, but here is where, so we have a form and we have the CSR token. Here we are just rendering the form. So we would have passed the form as a context here. So we are just going to pass a dictionary, and the key will be actually used in the HTML file. So we're just using the key, and it will render this form for the first time. And if it is updated, we'll just go to the profile directly with the form updated and with the new instance saved. Okay, right. So now what I want to do is, whenever a user registers an account, okay, whenever a user just entering an account new information, a profile is all automatically created, should be created to that account. So right now, if I created an account, and after that if I click on profile button, it will just show me that the profile does not exist, because what we have done so far is we have to create a profile individually for every user. So that can be done by, so yeah, if I create a new account, it is not essential that this profile will be created whenever I hit the register button. It's because user is a separate table. Every detail will actually implement the user object, but not the profile object, right? So if I want to have a profile for every user, as soon as they register, I want to modify the signals.py. Okay, so signals.py, in this model we will just like trigger any event when a particular event has happened. So you have to create a file called signals.py. So whenever this form has been filled, it creates a user object. Okay, the user table is filled. So in the models.py only this is filled, but this is actually quite a separate table, right? So this won't be affected at all. No profile will be created. So what we are going to do is, whenever a user object is created, it is going to create a profile object for that user as well. Okay, so that we don't have to go to the admin page. The staff does not have to create a profile for every student, right? Whenever a user registers, a profile table is also should be created for that user. So for that, the signals.py will help us. So actually this just an empty file that I created, this did not exist. So here I just have these these models that I want. So whenever the user is created, it is going to create a profile instance for that user, and we just need to have these as the decorator argument. So what I'm going to do is, this is a decorator from Django to dispatch, right? So we are going to create two functions. You can name it whatever you want, but the point is, these two functions will be triggered whenever a user instance has been created. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, whenever it receives a signal that a user instance have been created, so after the user instance has been saved, we are just going to execute this function. And what this function does, it says if created. So created is an argument that this function receives from this decorator. Okay, And if the user instance is created, we're just going to have profile.objects.create user equal to instance. So we're just going to create a profile instance for that particular user, right? And this is also save profile. So save profile is whenever there's a change in users, users object, we're just going to reflect that in the profile as well. Okay, and then we're just going to have instance of the profile to be saved. So these two functions will then create yeah will then create a profile whenever a user is saved. So whenever I just hit the register button, so I want to create a testing. So now if I okay so now if I log in with that user testing, and so now you can see the profile is visible. But if I didn't have the signals.py implemented, it'll just say the profile for that user does not exist. So since we have this kind of empty, it's kind of empty, but the profile object is created and we can fill it whenever we want in the profile. So that's why it does. So not to for this to, and one more thing we have to change is in the apps config, just going to use this method. So in the app config, only this is provided by default. It did not have this. So we're just going to have def ready self, and we're just going to import users.signal. So when the app is ready, it is going to import user.signal for it to actually function. Okay, and this will be created. So one more thing I want to show is in the models.py, I have this save that is kind of overwritten. Okay, so whenever the profile picture is selected, so I can choose any profile picture that I want, but sometimes the profile picture will be in types of megabyte and so on. So if I click on open a new tab, it will just be kind of this kind of a low quality image, because the profile pictures need not be a high quality image. So we're just restricting the height and width of the image for it to have some few megabytes or few kilobytes of data. So for that, we're just giving overriding this self method. Okay, so it does have a Django does have a self method by default. What you're doing is we are actually saving the old image or the very high quality image that the user is actually implementing, actually uploading. But we are just doing one more thing. So we are just having the image opened. So self.image.path, this image contains a path of the image, just opening the image, and if the height is 300 and the width is greater than 300, it means that the image is quite large, right? So we're just going to restrict the output size. So we are just going to pass a tuple called image.thumbnail. So this is kind of thumbnail, right? And we're just restricting the thumbnail to be the height and width of 300, 300, and then we are saving the image as the new image. So this image now contains this size of 300, and we're just saving the image now. But we are actually saving the old image, but after that we are just kind of restricting the image to be this width. Okay, so it kind of overrides, and this is what saves as the image. Okay, so since we have a profile ready, it's time to talk about how images are stored in the Django. Okay, there are two types of files that we are going to talk about. They are static files and media files. So static files are anything that we are just going to use during the development stage. Alright, so development stage, for example, all the CSS files, the JS files, and the images for the CSS, and so on. So as you can see, I have this static folder, and inside I have CSS, and I have this main.css. Okay, so let's take it let's look at the base.html. So this is the static file that I have loaded. So I've said load static. So since the CSS file inside the static folder, I need to do this, and after I've done that, I need to just use this as a href. So I'm saying that I have folder static. I have a file called that is of type static, and I'm just going to navigate to the css main.html. Okay, if I don't have this inside the css folder, I can just use main.css. Okay, so those kind of css, js and images for the css will be stored in the static file. So in order to include that, we have used static url and static files directory. Okay, so these are the things that change during from development to deployment stage. While in production, it's just going to be Django is not going to serve all these files. Okay, so now we can see that right now Django is providing all these URLs and so on, but while we upload it, while we are in production, Django server is not going to run, but the web server is run. So the web server needs to know where to actually find these files. So that's why we are just doing this. Okay, so this kind of URLs are just the local, I mean media URL is the local relative path, while media root is the absolute path. So these types of information will be useful while in the production stage. So now we know what static files are, we need to know what media files are. So media files are those files that the user is going to upload by themselves. Okay, yeah. So for example, I am uploading a profile picture, right? So this is user uploaded. So this is not kind of development program like we have the static files, but this is after the development. So it is after post production where the user is going to upload images. So those kind of files will be stored in the media URL, right? So we need to tell the web server after which the production stage is on. We need to let the web server know where to find these images. So while deploying, we'll just use some command like python 3 manage dot, let me see, python manage.py collect static. So while we are actually deploying it, we'll just run this command which will collect all the static files from the Django, and in that way the web server is going to know where exactly to store these images, where exactly to find these images, files and so on. So this is important. So I have this media URL, so that's why we have a folder called media. It is automatically created whenever I upload for the first time. The media folder is created, and we have this in the profile pictures. It's because in the models.py I've asked it to upload to profile pictures, right? So it will, so since it is an uploaded file, it will search for the media folder. If there is no media folder already, for example, if the user is uploading the profile picture for the first time, then this media folder will be created, and then since they have a media folder now, it will create a profile pictures folder. Okay, so that's how it actually uploading. So where's the settings? Okay, and this is just a media route that we are going to provide for the web server to actually find the files and to actually upload the files and so on. Okay, and one more thing, we in order to actually route to these URLs, so like whenever there's a request comes, there should be a URL, right? So for that we have to go to the urls.py and add these, but this is only for deployment. So if we should say like if settings.debug, so that means we are still in the production stage. So yeah, this the way, this if we change the debug okay, where's, yeah, debug to false, that's that we are actually moving to the production stage, then that time this function, I mean this will not run, then we have to use a different types of option. But since we are in the development stage, we are just going to use this kind of URL patterns. So here we're just importing static files, okay, and we're just appending to the URL patterns. Okay, so whenever an image or anything is requested related to the static files such as media, we're just going to route the URL patterns to the static files that are in the media and the static files. Okay, for deployment we can use this code absolutely, but for production we have to do different types of options. So for now this is enough. Okay, and one more thing, while we are having a profile form uploaded in the users templates where you are just uploading the profile picture, right? Not this. Okay, so since we are uploading the profile picture here, okay, and we are having this form, right? And forms, if we are uploading an image, we should provide the form to be a class of, I mean, we should provide this encoder type, that is multipart or form data. So this is very easy to forget. I mean, I forgot this many times and been in a trouble a lot of times. It seems that our profile is already correct, but there the picture will not be uploaded correctly, or it will not be shown. It's because unless we have this, the images will not be, stored to the, will not be post will not be posted to this Django. Okay, so we need to have this encoder type that says we are just trying to upload an image also. That's how we're just having this image. So these are the three things that we have, that we need to have them working. They are the static and media files, and also the form. Okay, so now that we have our profile ready, we are now good to go with the results tab of the students section. So the results just contain few graphs like bar chart, pie chart, and so on. So there are actually 7 graphs in which we are just going to implement with the in the help of Matplotlib. So I'm just going to log in as an admin, and what I'm actually doing is assigning grades to students. So if I want to assign a grade, just selecting the user, and I'll just assign their marks, right? So actually there are only 5 subjects that I actually created the graphs for. So it'd be like for this, I've actually created an object for this profile, and I've just entered them by comma, right? So this exactly we are just doing. So this is a mark for the first test for 5 subjects. Okay, so what I'm doing is creating a line graph for each of those. Okay, so it is in the grade object, and let me just open a shell to show you what it actually means. So shell contains all the preloaded Django activities. So I'm just going to import from users.models, import star. So I'm just going to import every table from the user.models. So this is the name of the app followed by the models file. So now that we have it, we can use grade.objects.all. Okay, so it returns a query set. Okay, so this query set is just for a single user. So what I've shown you for this particular user, it lies in this. So I'm just going to query the first user. So now I can return an object instead of a query set, right? So in this object I can have the ID. So the first object, the grade object is 1, and I can actually implement these operations as well. So dot user dot ut1 and so on. So in order to get the ut1 marks of that student, I can use this as a string. So as I told you, I'm not just going to use a separate column for every subject. So just for demonstration, it's just a string. We are just going to evaluate in the results tab. So this is what I exactly filtered. So grade objects dot first is what I have given here, right? And I'm just storing this. I'm just storing it in a variable called current object. Okay, and I can access the ut1 marks like this, right? Like this, and ut2 is 7834, and I can get that as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting these graphs, and I'm just creating a matplotlib graphs out of it. So IP, so this I'm just assigning a random subject called IP to the first element of the list, which is 54, right? So 54 is the first test subject mark, and this is the second subject, this is the third subject, and fourth and fifth, and so on. So these are the 5 subjects. So I'm just going to have a dictionary, and the keys are just going to be the course, right? So this is a subject, everything is subject. So I'm just going to have a separate list out of it, and the values, the corresponding marks, right? So I'm just going to create a new list. So we are just creating a new plot here, and I want it to be a fixed size. and then we are creating a bar graph, it's a bar chart. So this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. So courses are going to be on the x-axis, and courses are going to be on the x-axis, and marks are going to be on the y-axis. So if I generate that, it'll just give me a plot, right? So x label, y label is just for identification, and this is the score. Okay, and then we are just saving this image. So this will just save the image, right? And then we have to save it in this particular format. So I've already created an image field, right, for this particular plot. Okay, this image field is going to contain an image called ut1p. So this is the ut1 picture, first chart. So current dot ut1 is going to save an image, and I'm just going to pass the image file. Okay, and it will save the image to this respective column of the database. Okay, so it does not store the image, actually it stores the path to the image. So we're just saving the figure of the matplotlib in which the graph is actually shown. We're just converting it to an image file, and then just naming it the file, and we are just passing the image file, and we are just saving it. So likewise we are just doing for every subject. So ut2, it has different set of marks. So 78, we're just getting it and storing it, and ut3 is just another way. And here the unit test 1 is just again stored in pie chart. So it's just the same content, but it's shown in a visually appealing pie chart. We have this legend and so on. Okay, so the legend is kind of useful for pie charts, and so this is just another kind of, actually it is a line plot, but it contains a comparison of all the other things. So we have created 3 bar charts. Okay, so this is 1, 2 and 3, and we are just going to repeat for every of these 3 times. So this logic is actually fairly simple, just assigning the length to be an even multiple of anything. So I have created 6, so just this distance from first subject to this subject, it's because the subject should lie between these 3, right? So I've created a random index so that they have uniform spacing. So for that spacing I'm going to create values. Okay, and the color is going to be maroon. So for the first plot is going to be maroon, right? And the distance to the second plot will be 6 units. So 1 2 3 4 5 6, likewise. And this is the plt bar for the first one, and I'm going to give the values. So values is just old graph contents. Okay, and the second part is going to have a gray, and third is going to be navy, and likewise this will be creating for 5 times. Okay, so the first bar plot will be at at lengths of 6. So first this will create, so if we don't have 2 of these, only this will be created, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and the value is a list actually. Okay, I don't know where the value is, but yeah, it contains the list of all the subjects, and we're just having the value for that. And then these 2 plots will be created at the specific length. So I have I plus 1 here, because if I create it at I, it'll just overlap with this image. Maybe we can have a transparency and set that as well, but I just want to show it in a separate way. And this I plus 2 is 2 units wide, so this is I and this is I. So this at 6 7 8 9 10 11 12, and those will be at those intervals. Okay, values is just unit test values of 1 that I have already used in other graphs, and values 2 is just other graph other courses value, and value 3 is just 2 is the value for other courses marks. Okay, so we're just creating a line plot. The ticks is just IP MRF array, right, at regular intervals from I plus 1. So since this is the middle element, and in this list it is going to have like 7 13, so at 7 13 intervals it will just show the subjects, and we are just going to save this as ut12, and we're just saving to the database. Okay, and then we are just passing this image to the context for it to be displayed in the HTML page. Okay, so we're just passing the URL of the image, each image, and not the actual image. So these are 7 images, and in the which is it going to results.html. So we are just passing this context as a dictionary to this result.html. So this is going to be a list of images, and within a dictionary this is the context. And if I go to results.html, you can see that actually being rendered. So if I open it, okay, so for image and images, we're just having an image and source equal to the path to the image. So in source we just actually provide a path, right? For example, user slash image1.html. The image actually contains this path, but since it's a Django attribute, just having we just have a for loop that is going to like create a new division, and for every image it's going to create an image tag and so on, right? So that's how these plots are created. So since we have created a grade object, and like, yeah, okay, yeah, we just have these objects, right? And in the admin.site, in the admin.py, we have this grade, and it's just limiting the staffs to usually use these only 4 fields, right? So that's why we just have these 4 fields. So next we'll be implementing the homework section, and it is not actually kind of kind of simple as these. I just have these random images displayed for every kind of users according to this grade, and but that's going to be a different one. The homework will contain for respective students. I think I have, right. It's because it is the staff account. So I'm just going to log out and use it as a student account. This is just going to be different for different types of sections and for different users. So we'll be implementing. Hello everyone. So till now we have been using matplotlib's graph. We are actually generating graphs. We are storing it as an image and displaying it in the browser as an image. So we cannot actually do much with this image. We cannot get any exact information. The graph is not interactive. So for most cases matplotlib is fine, but when we are actually working with websites, Plotly is actually going to help. So Plotly is a library. So it has been developed for Python, JavaScript, and so on. So it's going to produce as interactive graphs. So this is the graphs that I'm talking about. So we can actually get the data from it. So you can see as I hover, it shows the data points, x-axis and y-axis, and there's much we can do with that. There's different types of data, and we can zoom way too much. Let me so I can zoom the graphs. I can just make the I can just zoom in the area of interest, okay, and reset axis, and many things we can do with this graphs. So this type of graph is going to help us a lot. So I'm not going to change the entire graphs. I'm just going to leave everything as is, but we can just make similar graph like it. So I'm going to show this one. Okay, so first we need to run this command in the shell called pip install plotly, and it will install plotly for us. And after we have installed this, we have to import this two libraries, so plotly.offline and plotly.graph objects. So the graph is quite intuitive. So first we are just going to get pass the data points. So Go has many plots like scatter, bar, and so on. Okay, so first we are actually defining this course versus values. So this is the data points that we are giving. Next we are just we need to give it as data. So next we need to provide the layout. So layout contains the title, x-axis and y-axis title, and so on. And we need to make it as a figure. Okay, so we're just passing this data and the layout to this figure object. So this figure we're just finally making it as a HTML plot. So we just need offline plot dot plot figure dot plotly, and we don't need to auto open it because actually plotly is cannot do not need Django. Actually they can we can actually make own web pages just by generating this plotly. But so since we are using with Django, we're just using this. So output type equal to div, so this is just an HTML. Okay, so with that said, I'm just passing this div as a bar, so I can name it whatever I want, but bar is what I used. And the HTML, I'm just rendering it. So I'm just having a container, and if there's a graph, I'm just outputting this graph. But I have this safe here. It's because HTML files actually can contain JavaScript. So if we blindly execute a code that may contain JavaScript, for example, if there's a form and the user that the user input JavaScript data instead of common username values and so on, that might actually affect our web page. So it can actually probably it can attack the database and so on. So those type of attacks are called injection attacks. So in order to keep us safe, that we know that this bar chart is HTML, and we know that it's safe because plotly generated for us. So it contains no harm. So we're just having this safe right next to the bar, and after that we're just rendering it. Okay, so that's how we can take the snapshot. It'll save the picture. We can select the whichever data we want and highlight the datas. Okay, so those kind of things we can do. And one more thing I have to show is an optimized code. So we were using codes like these, right? So we're just getting the profile for the particular user and username equal username first. So it turns out this is not actually necessary. So profile is equal to, we can say, request dot user dot profile. Okay, so this code is equivalent to this code. That means in the models.py, the user is related to this profile, right? So with this profile object, we can actually get this profile. So if I want to get the name of the user, for example, bio of the user, I can say request.user.profile. So now I am in this profile table, right? And I can get whatever section I want. So I can use dot about, that's exactly, sorry, bio, right? Not bio has profile picture and so on. So it's actually pretty easy to do this. We are just going to walk through this because every table, so user table is related to profile, so we will be accessing the profile from this user table as well. And profile table contains bio, so we can access bio from this profile as well. And if it contains any foreign key, we can actually use section also here. Okay, so but this also works fine, but this is just a long code that's not that's kind of ugly, right? So we can actually walk down this code, and for example, request.user.profile dot section, and with that section selected, I can select anything from the section. Okay, so I can access this section. So that kind of modifications we can do, but this is fine for now. So yeah, here also we can make the profile as request.user.profile.id, so it will get the profile ID for us. Okay, so no need this big of a code. Okay, so that's what I want to tell you to make an efficient code. Okay, so now that we have a page in which users can actually view the answers, it's time to get to the student account to actually answer those questions. Okay, so I'm just logging in as Tesla and testing F123. So here we can see that we have a question, and when we go to, okay, let me just have test, and if we go to next, it will just give me another question, and it will just be like random. And when the questions are over, okay, so there's another question. Okay, so when the questions are over, it will just have answered all the questions, and yeah, that will be saved in the database. So if I go to the admin, I need to log in as well. And see the answers that will be recorded. Okay, and random test and so on. So for that, we need to get to the homework section. So the homework section, uh, it's because I've already answered those and I'm a different user. Log out, log in again. Okay, the homework will go to this users and homework to #1. Okay, so what we are exactly doing is, let me start with the views.py, and I think I don't need all these. Save. Okay, so we are in the, yeah, we are in this users URL, and whenever I click on homework 2, so users/homework2, and I'm passing a primary key as well. So primary key denotes which question we are currently answering. So there are 3 questions, 1, 2, and 3, and that's it. And you would have seen that for 1 there's a question, and 2 the primary key changes, and 3 the primary key is this. Okay, and also the answer field is just going to be saved. I'm not getting a post request, I'm not making a post request, but everything is get. An index just an indicator for me. Yeah, I'll show you that. So this expects a primary key. Okay, so I'm passing it to home detail view, which is a class view. Let's go to the view. Okay, it might seem complicated, but it's actually not. So what we are trying to do is get the model for that question. Okay, and we are just overriding the context. So because I want to provide a few contexts like this, and that's why. Okay, so here we're just getting the context, and I just want to know if the context is end or not. When I get to the last question, you can see the next is not displaying any question, it says answer all the questions. So I'm just having this as a false. Okay, but I will check if there's any condition that I wanted. So whenever there's a list, whenever the questions are unknown, I'm just going to have it as true, and in the HTML file I'll just check if it is not true, I'll just render the question, or I'll just say answer all the questions. So it's just a flag that kind of indicates when it ends. Okay, so now I just need to display questions for a particular section, right? So I first need to check if the profile that I'm working is in a section at all. So there may be many sections. For example, the staff account, the staff account does not need to be in any section, right? Because he is the super user, they don't need to be in any section. But the student needs to be in a section for them to get the questions for that user. So first we need to check if the user is a valid user, that he has any sections or not. So what I'm trying to do is I need to get the profile of that particular user. Okay, so we have this self.request.user, but we need to get the profile for that user. Okay, so we need to get the user object. So how it's done is, so first we're just going to instantiate a user object. Okay, so user dot objects dot get id equal to 2. So this 2 will be provided by request.user.ic. So request.user, sorry, it's username. Yeah, okay. We can also search by username or id. So username equals okay. So if I print user object, it will show me that user. I'm using user to get the profile because I cannot get the profile directly. Self.request contains only information about the user. So to get that, I'm just using the user object. So this user object gets the user object like this, and then I'm going to pass this to the profile. So profile.objects.get user equal to user object. Okay, this is Venki profile. So now I got the profile for that user, and if I want the ID for that user, just use .id. Okay, so since we have this, you might have confused that I'm going to use username for user and user for user, right? It's because everything is in the models.py. User is a default table that contains username, columns, and so on. but profile is a table we created that contains a user object. So one to one, any kind of, yeah, any kind of fields refer to an object. So we need to provide that object to as an argument. So now we have a profile object for that user. We can see if the, yeah, you can see the section of that user as well, dot section. So this user is indeed in a section, so it will, this obviously will be true because EC is also section, and then we are just going to filter based on that section. Okay, so I'm just going to save this section object. Okay, and I'm going to filter the question based on that. Question dot objects dot filter section equal to section, yes, object. So now it will return me the questions only for that particular section. Okay, so now it is going to render, and this is just a basic logic for me to like render. I think it may be if you complicated, I might not need to use this, but this is what I came up with. Okay, so I equal to self dot quarts of pk minus 1. So that is just a primary key of this user. So I'm just going to get this as a primary key, and I equal to 0 now. So since I want to iterate over the questions, so it's just, even though it's a query set, it's just going to be acting like a list. So if I use like questions of 0, it'll give me the first question object and so on. So that's what I'm trying to achieve here. Maybe there's of course an efficient way, but for this project, this is what I can build. So it means, if it's not a first question, that means for the first time only this will be rendered. Okay, so I'm just passing this questions of 0 for the first time. I can even use 0 here, it's because first time it will be 0, but I've passed I, and index I'm passing it as I plus 1, and answer is just going to be an answer form. Okay, so that is what exactly here. So question is being rendered in this question detail, right? So it's not the end, so this will be true, and here, yeah, here I just have question and answer dot asp. So question I'm rendering in a card header, and in a card body I'm just answering the answer field. So as soon as it is rendered, I'm just going to hit the value of the button. These are all like not necessary, but yeah, these are all won't be necessary, but whenever the action is done, whenever the action is submitted, I just want the index of that question for me to get to the next question. So whenever I hit next, I want it to be 2 for me to enter the next question. So what I'm doing is, I got the index from the user .py. Now index is 1. Okay, so I'm just having this index now as +1. Okay, so whenever the form is submitted, so whenever I hit on next, it will be submitted, right? The action is URL homework2. It's the same URL, but we just having the primary key as 2 now. Index, I'm just adding it on. This is how we add number in Django HTML. So 1 plus 1 will be 2, and for the next time it will be 2. Now I click on next, 2 plus 1 will be 3, and for next time it's just the 3. Okay, and method equal to get. So since it's a get method, we're just going to get the answer as in the answer field. So if I type something here, random answer, it will be displayed here, but post method won't display it there, but I am just using get here. Okay, so for the first time this will be rendered, and for the second time we're just saving the object. Okay, the answer form, yeah, you can see the answer field has the random text, right? So I'm going to save that. So I'm just creating a new object, and yeah, answer form and answer. I won't be using answer form now. Yeah, I need to use it for the next rendering. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm just going to render an empty form for the next question. So assume that we are in this page, and we just need to use questions of I. Okay, so now I will be 2 minus 1, which is questions of one. So now it will render the second question here, and we have generated an empty form, and button equal to next. It's just some additional details, but you can safely ignore this. So here we got the question for that object. So question dot filter and questions of I minus 1. Okay, because we are now trying to save the answers in the models.py. In order to save an answer, we need three fields. Okay, so if an answer object contains all of these three fields, we can then use the answer object to save this. So this is the answer object I have rendered, and I'm just filling the three arguments that I want: question, answer field, and the user. Okay, so I'll just remove this for as you can see properly. Okay, now I answered question, answer field, and user. If I have all these three values, I can then directly save it. Okay, that's what I'm trying to achieve. So now to get the question, so we're just going to get the question object where the question is equal to questions of I minus 1. We're just like passing the question object here, not the text. This contains the text of the question, but we want directly the object, right? So we're just going to, so for example, question dot objects dot filter, where question field equal to a string where view was my question. Now if I have this, it will return me this query set and question object. If I want the first object, yeah, I won't be needing a query set because I want to save as an object every time. So I'll just use first, and it will give me this object. So this object I'll be given to fill the answer, because every answer need to have a separate, question for itself, right? So we're just filling these, and now we just have the answer field. So answer field, as we know, while in the URL it has this answer field, so it will be in the request.get instead of post, because we are having post get request. Okay, and we are having this answer field, so we're just filling this answer field for that particular question. So question of I minus 1 is the previous question, and then we're just getting the user of that answer. So who answered that question is very important in the models.py, right? Who answered this particular question object. So that's why we're just getting the profile of that particular user. So it's just like this. I could have saved this in a variable and then used it later, but I just queried it again. So since we have answered all of these, this answer will then be saved, and then we are just contexting the next question and the answer form on the button. Yeah, I don't know why I implemented, but it won't be necessary. Oh yeah, button, it's because yeah, it is not necessary. I just want to use it as here. I can just change this to next here as well, value equal to next, then I won't be hitting this. Okay, so that's the logic for that. And then whenever we have answered all the questions, it will just display like, yeah, we're just making the flag to true, and now the length of the question is exceeding. We made the flag as true, and we return the context. Yeah, after saving the context, we are returning it, but this time the context has the end as true. So we're just seeing if it is ended true or false, and then we are just rendering the content appropriately. Okay, so I think that finishes our project, and yep, results, profile, and everything. Okay, so now we'll talk about the assignments. Okay, and so now I'm logged in as admin. So the admin can view the answers of various departments. So instance, if I want to view the IT departments, there are several students, and then getting one student will give the answer for that particular student. Okay, so the admin actually can provide a lot of functionalities. So the super user can actually add questions and also add answers. Okay, so if I want to add an answer, I can select a question. So for example, yeah, this is second assignment, and I'll just select a user. and he can answer the question as well, or this one. Okay, so this is fake answer. Okay, so the admin actually has the power to answer them, but during this student account, whenever I log in, only the student can then answer. Okay, testing at 1 2 3. Now the users, now the student can actually answer this. So we are just going to try to implement this, but admin can actually provide, I mean, can do a lot of things. Okay, testing at 1 2 3 again. So we can add sections. I want, so this is my newly added section. I can delete it, and yep. So by deleting it, it will actually delete also the question, right? So whatever question was in that MEC department, it will actually delete the question, and also the profile that has been created for that department. Okay, and we have to be careful because we in the models.py we provided on delete equal to models.cascade. It means whenever the profile is deleted, the grade for that profile will also be deleted, because we won't after the profile is deleted, if we don't delete the grade, there will be null values everywhere, and it will be sometimes be messy. In order to avoid that, we can just delete the grade whenever the profile associated with the is deleted. So first let's see how the admin can actually render the questions. So here is where the admin will actually now take me back. Okay, here is where the admin is will actually add a question. So this is a CSE question, and I want to select a department. I'll choose CSE. Okay, this question is out for all the CSE users. So this is how the admin is going to create questions, and we can see the profiles. CSE user. So whoever is enrolled in that CSE will be able to actually answer the questions. Alright, so with that done, we're just going to see how the student is able to, I mean the teacher is able to going to see this list view, so he can select any of the department, and yeah, then there will be profile for that department. For example, IT student contains every department, every students enrolled in it, and then we can see what they have answered for our question. Okay, so this particular student has answered these questions again. So but the questions can be answered again and again. We did not actually replace the answer, but that's what we are going to do. Okay, so first let's see the classes. So what happens when the classes is clicked? So we have this section list. Okay, it displays the list of sections, and whenever I click section, it will just open the students available in that section, and then if we click this instead, we'll just open the answers done by students. So let's start with the urls.py and work our way from there. We don't need these for now, and yeah. Okay, so url dot contains, we did not implement, yeah, you see the URL for the classes, not this one. So whenever I click on classes, it goes to the users apps, and then it has this section list. I mean, it does not go to user app specifically. I've made it go to the user app and then route it from there. So what I mean is, it just chooses this path, and then every other URL is followed by, this path. Okay, so whenever it sees the users, it will go to the users URL because I've asked it to. Maybe I can change this if I want, but that's what happens. And then the user will take it from here. Okay, so whenever I click on classes, the section list is going to be displayed, and this is the section list view. Okay, so here we are just asking the view to render this section list view as view. So this is a class view. So whenever there's a class view, it is going to use the name and dot as view, and we just provided name to it. Okay, so in the views, this is all I have. Okay, literally this is all I have for it to display everything. So Django provided something called generic list view. Okay, so whatever model we are providing it, this is the only argument we are providing it to this list view, and it will automatically default. I mean, I don't even need to give it a context, right? I mean, the render HTML page. So what happens is Django generic list view actually tells that whenever we give it a model called section, so we have section, right? It will defaultly it goes to search called section list.html, because this is a list view and it's going to render this HTML, and it will also pass a context of that variable as like the class name, exactly as the class name. I did not provide any context like here. I did not provide any template for it, but we do need to provide a template under the name called section list, right? So because it's we are just going to implement this, so it will search for this file name, right? And it will actually pass the context. So this context will be this exact list, so it will return a query set like this: ec, it, everything. And I'm just going to the for loop and just displaying them as a button, so as a link but as a button, right? So that's how the view actually provides a lot of features for us. Either, I mean, if we don't have used this list view, it is going to write a detailed list like this. I mean, a detailed view like this as well. Okay, but since Django has this generic list view, we are just going to use it. So we just need to name the list view and made it to extend this list view, generic list view, and we need to provide a model. And afterwards, the Django will take care of everything. It will provide the context, it will render the appropriate it will render the appropriate HTML file, which is just the name of the file. We have to give it as the section underscore list. If we have it under different name, it will say like list view not found. All we need to do is give it a section and make a template for it to render. We don't need to write any big views for it. Suppose we want to override some of these. If I want to give additional details to the context, I can just override this context method. So I'll just call the default context and then add extra context. Okay, but this is in the next section. We'll just actually discuss. So after it is all is rendered, so I mean it's just going to render every section of the object, right? So for example, section dot objects dot all, right? This is just a query set, and this query set is what exactly passed to this context as section list. I'm just going to render, I mean, for section in section objects dot all. And I'm going to print section, and this is what exactly is rendered, right? So that's what I'm doing here, but I did not provide any context, so that's the specialty of this list view. So, and after that, so whenever the user clicks on one of these, okay, and I've provided a URL called section detail. Okay, so section detail is another URL provided here. Okay, it accepts a primary key. So this is kind of, it might seem weird, but what we are saying is section detail is going to be a page, but it's not going to be in itself. We are just having a section number associated with it. So for example, 1, 2. So if I click on the one department, you can see it changed to section detail -1. Okay, so this means we are just providing a detailed version of the section. And for the first section, so if I have this for IT, it will say second, and if I say for the Mac, it will say 6, because I deleted 2 sections in the middle. So that's how it is. So it will just get the ID of this. Okay, so that's what we are providing in this HTML. So whenever one button is clicked, we're just going to this section detail and we are giving the ID of that section, right? So section contains ID as well. So if I just get the loop and print the section.id, it will print the ID of the section, and that's what exactly I'm passing it as the primary key. So whenever the button is clicked, it will go to the URL section detail with the primary key of that EC or IT something. Okay, and then what happens is it will go to this URL. Okay, and it will pass this primary key, the number, right, as PK. The PK is going to be received in this section detail view, which is kind of like the exact view here. So this is going to be a detail view. It's because it's going to accept primary keys and it's going to be showing particular department's details. So this is the detail for that particular department, right? So it's going to be taking more. So it's not just a list, it's going to take more department. And so section will also get the exact details, but what I additionally want is I want to give the profile of that student, I mean profile as a context. Okay, so I created a profile object because this is everything is a profile, right? I want to render this. Maybe I can just give profile, but I actually want to like get the detail view for the section, so that's why I did not give profile here, but I call the profile object and self dot quads of pk. So this quads contain the pk, this is a dictionary. So I'm just going to filter all the profiles that are in a particular section. So it goes like this. So profile dot objects dot filter, I can say section equals ECE or ID. Yeah, it does not have a section there. ID equals 1. So it will return every profiles that are belonging to a particular section. Maybe I can have a different one. Profile dot objects dot filter, section is equal to an ID. Okay, yeah, what I did is this section actually expects an ID. I was trying to get it as a string. So what it is actually saying is, so for the particular department with section ID equal to 1, it is displaying every profile for that. That means for EC department there is 3 profiles. Okay, so I just need that info, but section model only provides the context of section, so I need to override this get context data. I just call the old old context, default context, and I'm just adding another profile to it. So here it will just get all the profiles of that department. Okay, so whenever this is rendered, so EC department contains all the 3 profiles. So that's what I'm passing at a context, and then this will be under the name of section detail.html, and you can see I gave it as section detail. Okay, so I'm just going to render the section detail.html, and here I have the profiles, right? So this results I'm just looping through and making it as a button, and here I'm just making the link for the profile. Okay, so here I'm linking the profile detail for that particular student. Okay, so just like how I did here, whenever the button is clicked for the department, it will just go to section detail and with the primary key of that one. Likewise, whenever one particular profile is selected here, I'm just going to get this information about the student. So this student has answered the same question again and again. This is for test while I created. So you can see profile detail of 2. So this profile has an object, I mean has an ID of 2. So that's what we are exactly going towards. Okay, this was in the section detail of 1 in the EC department, but here there are many profiles. I'm just clicking it and I'm telling it to go to profile detail and with the primary key. So profile detail, and it will provide the primary key of that profile, and the profile detail contains these logic. Okay, so profile detail is another list, a detail view, and it accepts a primary key just like the section detail. And here I'm just calling the view profile detail view. So profile detail view is kind of similar, but here I have the model as a profile, and I want to override as well. It's because I want to, along with the profile details, I want to ask him the profile questions, right? what the profile has questions, and what the answers answered by that profile to this question. So for that we have this context. So we have to call the default context, and we want to extend these. So since I want the question and answer associated with this profile, I'm going to create answer subject, question subject, where the id where the user has this profile. Okay, this what I'm doing is I'm just filtering the answers. There are many answers. um, Let me just get answers dot objects dot all. But I want to, yeah, there are many profiles answering this, and there are many truncated. For example, Tesla answered, Venki answered, and so on. But I want to restrict this answer only to that particular profile. So since I'm logged in as Venki here, I want to get the answers of that particular profile and also the questions allocated to him. So since he is in an EC department, we should get only the questions that are allocated to that EC department, and the answers according to the questions. So this is how we are exactly walking through. Okay, so we need an answer object. If we go to the models.py, where is the models? Okay, so models.py, we have this answer, right? So this answer needs a question. Okay, and this answer needs an answer, needs a user and an answer. So we need to provide those information that will get the answer for that particular user. So in this views.py, we need to filter objects according to that particular profile. So here we have the profile. So in order to get the answer for that particular profile, we have to pass that profile object. But profile object needs to have an user object, right? So we need to go 3 times around it. So we are just filtering answers based on profile, and we're just getting the profile object based on id. So id is what I've used it here. It does not require user. It's because whenever in the section detail I have this profile detail, go to this profile id, I already have the profile id. If I don't have the profile id, if I have only the user id, I'll just say like user.objects.get, for example, user.objects.get id equal to self.request.user.id. Okay, so this is because in case I did not have a profile object, profile id, luckily I have this profile id since I am in the profile object here. So I'm just iterating to the profiles and have this profile id. But we may not have the profile id always. We may have only the id. So for every class view, we'll just have self.request, and it contains the user details and also the id associated with the user details. It's for example, I have this, not this. I have this profile, right? It has a request argument by default. It just has information about the user, about this user class. But sometimes we get the profile details exactly. So we'll just get the user details, and then we create a profile, and then with the help of this profile, we will create an answer. That's exactly how it is. Okay. So we need answers, and since we have the profile ID directly, we're just getting the ID from the self.keyword arguments of primary key. So KWR means keyword arguments. It just gets many additional parameters in case we want it. Okay. So now we have the answers answered by this. Yep. So I can say answer.objects.filter ID is equal to user is equal to, and this is an ID. For example, I think its ID is 2, and it will just return all the answers answered by only this profile. If I have a different ID, we don't have an ID for that. This is just an ID answered by Tesla. Okay, this 4 represents profile ID of Tesla. So that's how we get the answer of that particular student. and questions is similarly like that, but we want to give the section. So in the models.py you can see it expects a section object, okay, but answer expected a user object, right? But this requires a section object. So for that we need to get the section for that particular department. So there are many sections like section dot objects dot all. I want to get a particular section, so get maybe id equal to 1 or the section field equal to ec. So section equal to I think it's ece. Yep. So whenever I get the section of that user, it will just return me the section object. So here in the views.py I'm just getting the section of that particular user. So profile of that user contains section, okay. So every profile has a detail of which section he belongs to. For example, profile dot objects dot get id equal to 2. Okay, so this is, I have the Swanky profile, and if I get the section of this by using dot section, it will return me ECE. So with that help, so since I have this ECE, now I can filter questions based on only ECE. So it is everything is based on the ER diagram. So we're just like looping through, because in order to get the question we need the section of that user, okay. In order to get the section we need the profile of that user. With that profile, so we have the primary key of that id, so which will give the id, and we can filter the profile with that, exactly like how we have done with this, and it will return a profile. And to get the section we just have the dot section and it will give the ECE. So now I have the questions based on section equal to ECE, okay. So I'm just going to save this section object in a variable, okay. Now if I want to use the questions, so questions dot question dot objects dot filter section equal to section object, okay. So now the questions are just for this particular department, okay. So section object is an ECE object, so whenever I filter the question based on that object, it will return me those questions only for that only for that department. So I'm just saving those questions in a variable and I'm passing it as a context, so adding it as a context, and I also got the answers right, and there we go. And range, I did not use it in the range, but I used it while testing, so I won't be needing it, I guess. So since it's a profile detail, it will search for profile detail.html, so I gave it here, and here I don't need this range, let me delete it. Okay, so here I'm just rendering the questions and answers, okay. Okay, yeah, I just realized later that I don't even need this question, right? It's because let me just comment this and explain. It's because in the models.py every answer has a question on its own, so I don't need to query explicitly to have the questions, right? So we don't need this. So with the help of only answers, I can even get the answer.question. So every question has an answer, right? So we're just rendering it as a card header, and the card body contains answer.answer field, so which is the answer. So question and answer. So if I query answer.objects.all, it will give me a list of answers. So I'm just going to get the first question, and this is the answer for that. And if I want the question for that answer, I'll just use dot question, right? So this is the question and this is the particular answer. So models.py, we have the question, right? That's why we were able to query the dot question, and then we are just rendering. Okay. rendering that. So this is just a query set, and we're just rendering all the answer, and for that each answer we have this answer dot question and answer dot answer field, right? So if I have answer field, it will just give me the answer itself. Yeah, this is my answer. This is just how the string is returned, but this is my exact answer. So that's what I'm actually rendering here. Okay. Yeah, I actually had this in my first experiment where the question was not available, but then later I add the question to my models, and then it became very easy to actually use the questions. So with this, that's how this is getting rendered in here. So this is the card. So just a bootstrap card, and the card header is just going to be the question, and this is going to be the answer. So I've had like many fake questions and many fake answers just for testing. Okay, so I hope that is clear. But how we are going to walk through is actually very important. We're just, if we need questions, it is answer already available with this answer. So we can just get the filters based on particular user. Okay. Okay then. So up next we'll be implementing how the user is going to answer. So it's just the same logic but with